All right, two quick developments to pass along. I believe I miscalculated the numbers. The 2,000 drug offenders that I referred to are those whose prison sentences were commuted or reduced. It was 1,176 going into this today, an additional 209, so that brings to 1,385 prison inmates who are looking to get out of jail a lot earlier than was originally going to be the case. The president adding to that by reducing their prison sentences, in some cases, to releasing them now. Then separately, the issue that is getting the ire of some Republican senators, including Senator Tom Cotton, reacting to reports that President Obama has commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence, the leaker, to WikiLeaks. Quote, when I was leading soldiers in Afghanistan, Private Manning was undermining us by leaking hundreds of thousands of classified documents to WikiLeaks. I don't understand why the president would feel special compassion for someone who endangered the lives of our troops, diplomats, intelligence officers, and allies. We ought not treat a traitor like a martyr. The backstory on all of this is Jennifer Griffin in Washington, D.C. Jennifer.
Neil, what's really interesting about this decision about Chelsea Manning is that on January 12th, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks said that he would agree to extradition to the United States if the president commuted the sentence of Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning has been in prison at Fort Leavenworth, an Army prison in Kansas, for the past 7 years. Twice last year, she tried to commit suicide. She began in 2015 this process of transitioning to the female sex, beginning hormone replacement therapy, and the Army was going to be put in a very awkward position of whether the taxpayer should pay for this sex change surgery at some point. So at this point in time, it looks as though former Private Bradley Manning will have her prison sentence commuted and will get out of prison on May 17th. Private Manning was supposed to remain in prison for 35 years. What's interesting is the president did not, Neil, pardon Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. There had been an appeal by his lawyers for a pardon and a commutation, and that did not happen. Also of note, General James Cartwright, the former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he was pardoned by President Obama for lying to the FBI. He was under investigation for revealing national security secrets as part of an investigation into the revelations about the Stuxnet virus, which had attacked the Iran nuclear program. At the time, I think there's a great deal more sympathy for General Cartwright, because at the time, it was widely believed among journalists that the White House had asked him to speak to journalists about this, and then the FBI began investigating. So General Cartwright, we've just learned, has been pardoned by President Obama. Neil?
Just because Bergdahl and some others that you mentioned have not been pardoned in this way doesn't mean in the next couple of days they still could be, right?
Well, it's not clear at this point whether there are more pardons or commutations coming. This certainly was a large batch that was just announced. But I expect a lot of blowback from this Manning decision.
Okay. Thank you very, very much, Jennifer. We've got former Army Intelligence Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer with us. Tony, what do you think of this?
Oh, I think it's not justice. As Senator Cotton said, you mentioned his view of this. I share it. I think there's some real problems by the fact that he was dead to rights caught on this. Stuff he did caused a lot of disruption and damage to the operations in Afghanistan. And, you know, I think it's one of those issues where I think a lot of us stand for accountability, and clearly this was not accountability. And let me just say this, Neil, you know, the Army does bear some responsibility for this. I've said this in your show as well. I mean, Chelsea or Bradley Manning, as you just point out, has some mental issues. I mean, he or she, depending on which day it is, clearly should never have been enlisted in the military, because there's some severe issues there. So the Army does bear that responsibility. But the Army was not responsible, nor was anyone else, for the deliberate taking of classified material and providing that to someone many of us consider an enemy of the state, to Julian Assange for purposes of disclosure.
All right. Tony, thank you very, very much. Again, Chelsea Manning had been looking at decades in prison, but will be out in May. This might seem eye-popping for those who follow the waning days of a president with the perfect right and power to do any and all of this. For some historical perspective on whether we've been there, done this sort of thing, UVA Center for Politics best-selling author Larry Sabato. Larry, presidents are free to do this. They often do in their final days. How does this stack up against other examples you can remember? The most alarming I remember, Mark Rich with Bill Clinton in his final hours in office. But how does this stack up?
You took the name right out of my mouth. I was going to compare it to President Bill Clinton's pardon of Mark Rich and some other associated individuals. That was extremely controversial and was a source of friction in the days and weeks after Bill Clinton left office. You're right. President has the pardoning power literally until noon, exactly noon, on January 20th. A president could be sitting on the inaugural platform signing commutations or pardons.
Is that right?
And it would be constitutional. Oh, absolutely. All powers remain with the incumbent president until noon on the day that his successor is sworn in. Now, what do they usually do? Not all presidents have done this. Some have given very, very few pardons or commutations at all, including at the end. But others choose to save, let's say, some of the most controversial for those final days for two reasons. There's no more political revenge that can be taken on them because they're leaving office, and the presidency is the last office you run for, obviously, so they don't have to worry about it. But second, there are no political implications for them, and really not so much for their party. The next election's a couple of years away, and they feel like it will be swallowed up in the giant hoopla surrounding their successor's inauguration, and they're right. That's normally what happens. The Mark Rich pardon was an exception to the rule.
You know,
and this one may be too. Manning may be too, Neil, because can I just point out an irony here?
Sure.
The president has just pardoned Chelsea Manning, who leaked some very important confidential secrets that hurt the United States to WikiLeaks. Now, WikiLeaks played a role, you could argue about whether it was major or minor, in defeating his candidate for president, Hillary Clinton.
Professor. The irony of this is stupefying. But, again, to your point, presidents can do this sort of thing. Do you expect more in the next couple of days out of this one?
I wouldn't be surprised. It's possible that this is the last grouping because he's got a press conference tomorrow, his last press conference, and I think he wouldn't want to step on that story. And you really do get close to the inauguration for your successor, and you would be seen as stepping on his story. So this may be it, or there may be some other drug offenses pardoned or commuted in one fashion or another. I know he was planning on doing a lot of those at the end.
And indeed, a good many today. 209 more today, on top of 1,176 whose prison terms were also shortened, if not wiped out, on this day. 1,385. Professor, thank you very, very much. And no doubt, to the professor's fine point, that will come up tomorrow in a press conference, the president's last in this office. What we all want to hear him say in that conference after this.